Okay, it's Sunday afternoon. It's warm out. We don't get warm too much here, at least not for a while. So I'm outside. I'm going to subject you to traveling cars and trucks. Shouldn't be too bad. It's Sunday afternoon, okay? And I just wanted to go over what we did. This is a recap. And the reason I think you need a recap is the same reason in the introduction, that this is a whole new way of looking at things. And we're addressing your paradigm. Paradigm's a big word. It's your paradigm. The way you see the world is your paradigm. It's not mine. It's not people in Moscow. It's not people in Venezuela. It's your paradigm. And it's very different. And everybody has a different way of looking at things. However, we have to filter things down so that we can all talk to each other and have the same concepts. So what we're doing here is trying to get happy. And you probably were expecting, like, take vitamin B12 or, whatever the panacea of the day is. And we're not going to do that. We're talking about contentment, which basically means you have to put your head on straight, find out what your expectations are, and realize if they're any good. So, as a recap, let's do a little quick recap. Started out with, what is happiness? I don't know. Do you? Then we asked, are you happy? The answer is no. If you walk around saying you're happy, I think there's something like wrong with you. You're delusional. What you are is maybe temporarily pleased, you're emotional high, things are going well, you got a good job. Is that you? If you got a new job in wherever, I used to say like New York City, but that's a horror now. In Toronto, Shar music store in Toronto. I don't even know if it's still there. So you got a real high-paying $100,000 a year to check the staplers in a high-rise in Toronto, and along with it goes a condominium. Oh boy, are you happy? No, that didn't make you happy. That makes you pleased, content, somewhat. It makes you less fearful, and it makes you feel positive. Positive's good. I'm not saying it's not good. And it's plain. I don't care if you hear it. The new paradigm is to stop seeking happiness and to seek contentment. And that requires a new way of looking at things. Back in the day when we had schools, you would read Emerson, who was probably the greatest American writer, or one of them. And he was a minister for a while, and he gave lectures, and one of his lectures came out as an essay, and it's called the Transcendentalist. You can go online and read the Transcendentalist. Have some coffee handy, because it's going to it's slow reading. It's the old days when people were literate. Now we're not literate anymore. We're all TikTok people. You're going to have to sit down and carefully think about what's going on, and perhaps look up words. Do I have a mark right here? Anyway, so don't look at that mark. Don't do it. So, okay. Now, so look at the Transcendentalist, and what he's telling you there is that there are two kinds of people. There's the materialist, and I will lay odds you are one. And there are the, I don't know. He had his own words, but there are people who are more sensitive and spiritual, let's call it, okay? There are the people who are not cause and effect. You might think, oh, I'm not a materialist, I don't care about having a new Cadillac. That's the wrong definition of materialist. Materialism is a person who's rooted in cause and effect, and they're from the show me state, and they want to see facts, okay? And those people do not understand the Transcendentalist. They don't understand what you're talking about, or who you are, or how you think. Whereas the Transcendentalist completely understands the materialist. So what you got to do is figure out these two schools of thought and think about it. Don't go blasting through videos. These videos are not quick, and they're kind of a building block system. They're not part of, like, 12 new facts. No, it's dealing with you and your way of looking at the world and the way you've been programmed to look at the world. All right, so we're looking at happiness, and we're saying, well, no, let's do contentment. And we've said contentment is found by having a rational and spiritually sensible expectation in life. If your expectations are sane and under control and fit your life, and you are able to meet them, you're content. What is this happy stuff? You don't need that. As we mentioned, happiness creates unhappiness. That's the old yin-yang, okay? So that's part of what we talked about. I guess what I'm trying to get at is here, you have to actually go slowly with this information, okay? You can't zip through it. This is not TikTok, all right? If it were, the Chinese communists would be at your house now. So, so part of finding out what your expectations are and if you're able to meet them is being able to use reasonable logic. It's called right reason. It's logic based upon assumptions, which we touched on. And I mentioned that you have to pay attention to your assumptions all the time. Even if you're like, your neck's all tightened up and you're having a fight with somebody, argument, discourse, keep in the front of your mind, not the back, your own assumptions. Because if you don't know what your assumptions are, how are you going to counter them other than to attack like an animal in a tribe? You don't want to be a tribalist. You are one, but you want to rise above it, which was the nature of our original government, and it's also the nature of Judeo-Christian ethic that gave individual rights and responsibilities, most of the Christian side, to the individual. And the individual is responsible for what they do and how they act and to organize their lives. You may think this is not good, but it is good. Do you really want the Department of Motor Vehicle to take care of you? So, so we have to look at words too, because arguments are made up of words. One of my popular examples is love. What's the word love mean? I don't know. Do you? Do you love chocolate? Do you love the beach? Do you love your wife? How could this word exist? Okay, it's part of the vagaries of our language. In some ways it's really good because it helps us get through things. But don't forget, as an assumption, our words are not precise. And you must be familiar with them. If you're in a political realm, let's say I once gave some information to a college student, she's down in Pittsburgh, I think, and I just said, I wasn't like trying to teach her anything about arguing, but she reported back what I had said was that today's liberals are not liberals. And oh my God, the entire group she was talking to freaked out because they've been trained that they're liberals and they're really superior because they're liberals, but they don't know what a liberal is. Do you? Do you actually know what a liberal is? If you think you do, look up the term classical liberal, because the word has been changed in the last 20 years. It now means the opposite of what liberal used to mean. When I grew up, I would say, I started out as a liberal Democrat. As soon as I went to a Democratic clubhouse, I became a non-Democrat. And then, as a kid, and then I can't call myself a liberal. I'm a classical liberal because I believe in individual freedom. The classical liberal is essentially a conservative who wants a constitution and, let's say, a moral code. At the same time, they want to protect the individual from the government. That's where we were 30, 40 years ago. All the arguments in politics, maybe 50 years ago, were about the government is the government of the people, and we can't forget to protect the individuals. That's what the argument about. Now it's about the government controlling everybody and persecuting people who are different. And if you don't agree with me, you got to start paying attention, which brings us to consciousness. Do we know what consciousness is? Well, we know it when we see it, maybe. It's like, that was the Supreme Court, I think it was, came down with a decision on pornography. And basically the decision was, well, the community knows what it is when they see it, which is actually very wise. So how else do you find it? How else do you stop it from being sold in the drugstore? It has to be a community standard. Of course, as the community deteriorates, then that whole standard deteriorates, and we have where we are today. So consciousness, we want to be conscious. What does it mean? People have different levels of consciousness, but it exists mostly in all of us, and it's defeated in many of us by programming, propaganda, emotional propaganda, like in the TV news and Hollywood movies and things like that. But if you can back away from it and be like Mr. Spock, he's your hero. Mr. Spock is your hero. He backs away and he looks at things from a distance, and his basis of logic is really looking at assumptions. Okay, he's not a wizard at being able to. He probably is, but he's not naming off fallacies, logical fallacies, which is part of the formal study of logic. He just looks at the definitions, the assumptions. So that's what we got to do. So now we got that. We got consciousness is what we got to do. And how do we get conscious? We have to use our juggling skills. And when we juggle something, know what it is you're juggling. If you're juggling an assumption, for example, liberal, you have to know what you're talking about, or at least what the other person's talking about. And I don't know. It's important to remember what Voltaire said, and you should just listen for a second. He said basically, what did he say? I may disagree with you. No, first define your assumptions, okay? Then I can discuss things with you. He didn't say that. It was probably better French than English. He also said, I may disagree with what you say, but I will defend to the death your right to say it. Yeah, those are the old days. That's what you call a liberal. Not now. You don't call the invasion of Ukraine a war. Okay, speech is the end, final product of the enslavement of people. If they can control your speech, then we're all lost. So, consciousness and language. And I did repeat this, and I'll stop now. It didn't seem like there's too much noise, because I wanted to rehash what we're doing, because we're changing your paradigm. And to do that, it's got to be slowly done. And you have to accept it as you're going along. We're not a cult. I don't know. I'm not a cult. And we're not trying to talk you into anything. This is your life, okay? And that's some kind of bug. And and that I had a wonderful closing line. What was it? And the bug is in my eye. So, what was the bug? Maybe we'll start next time with this wonderful line. And it was really important. Along with consciousness, you should probably work on having a memory. So, have a good Sunday.